I want to introduce my guest, George Gilder. Now, George Gilder is one of these people, he's been a marked man for some time, for years. I don't know when George first came to a Socrates event, quite a few years ago, but I even singled him out in the crowd as a future Socrates in the City guest, because he just is that way. If you know anything about him, you know that nobody deserves to be a Socrates in the City guest more than he. But that makes him difficult to sum up. He's a polymathic genius, as many of us here are. I'll just read, the standard introduction. You can read between the lines. But he's a bit of a legend. He's an influential American author, economist, and entrepreneur known for his groundbreaking ideas on technology, economics, and culture. He gained prominence in the 1970s with his book, Wealth and Poverty, which I believe had something to do with bringing supply-side economics into the national vocabulary. Am I getting that wrong, George?
No, I mean, I was Reagan's most quoted living author.
Reagan's most quoted living author is my guest tonight. If you think you are Reagan's most quoted living author, see me after class. George Gilder's work often intersects with his Christian faith, offering a unique perspective on the relationship between spirituality and economic systems. He's also authored many other books, such as Life After Google, where he explores the future of technology and its impact on society, advocating for a decentralized internet. He is co-founder of the Discovery Institute. Any of you who have been followers of Socrates in the City know that something like half of our guests come from the Discovery Institute. So for that alone, George deserves our praise and gratitude. Tonight, we're going to be talking about his new book, Life After Capitalism. Before I bring George up, I've interviewed George on this subject at my radio studio. And the one thing that we had going for us in the radio studio that we don't hear is a Tiffany glass skylight. And when I pointed it out to George during the interview, he said very nonchalantly, "Oh yeah, Louis Comfort Tiffany was my great-grandfather." I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now. George Gilder, welcome to Socrates in the City. I hate the fact that you lied about your great-grandfather, George, and I want you to come clean. Take this opportunity to tell the group that you were just kidding.
Well, my grandmother was his daughter, Comfort Tiffany. And
I guess if you put it that way.
Comfort Tiffany Gilder, and my sister's name is Comfort Tiffany Gilder. And we have Tiffany's galore, Tiffany glass.
It was startling to me when I...
My father collected, he worked for Tiffany, and he collected glass, Tiffany glass, his favorite exhibits. And my father was killed in the war. And but he wanted me to have a selection of the most choice Tiffany glass, which was stored in our barn, with our hay barn behind our house. And the hay barn was ignited by an arsonist, and all the Tiffany glass was consumed. So I have no physical evidence to present beyond DNA. You can consult 23andMe.
Wow. Well, then China would have, the information. I steer clear of 23andMe. I don't want them to have it. Your book we're going to discuss tonight is Life After Capitalism. Do us a favor and sum up the thesis. I mean, I've interviewed you on this before, but it's complex. It's a little difficult. So I just want to make sure that we get the foundation. So what's the fundamental thesis of Life After Capitalism?
Well, in the beginning was the Word. It wasn't the atom. It wasn't some material thing. It wasn't depleted natural resources. In the beginning was the Word. And human beings are chiefly minds, not mouths. Human beings are creative in the image of their creator. And to the extent that they're emancipated, they produce wealth. And wealth is most essentially knowledge. As Thomas Sowell has explained, the Neanderthal in his cave had all the natural resources we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely the increase of knowledge. Wealth is knowledge.
Now, in the book, you're sort of arguing against materialism. In other words, when you say that it's not that in the beginning was the atom. No, it's not about material. It's about what we do with the material, and it's what our minds do with the material. So now, I guess my first question is, who would argue with that? Who is arguing with that?
Everybody.
Well, right. I mean, in the circles in which you travel, I'm sure. But for us,
I mean,
less
Adam
sophisticated.
Smith argued it. This is to some degree a critique of Adam Smith.
Okay, then do us a favor and explain that.
Adam Smith founded capitalism on mimicking physics. He wanted to be the Newton of economics. And so he really began with what I call a materialist superstition.
But just for a moment, just to clarify, Adam Smith writes The Wealth of Nations in 1776.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of economic theory in the 18th century. So when he writes that book, obviously Newton...
It was a great foundational book, obviously, but its flaw is its mechanical model of the economy that echoes physics governed by gravity. Smith's view was economics governed by self-interest, which easily got transmuted into greed, and which now...
We're dealing with that now. In other words, the point is that idea, that self-interest described that way, which is really, in the movie Wall Street, greed is good.
No.
You and I both know that's nonsense. That's a twisting of what it ought to be.
Yeah.
But you're saying that begins with Adam Smith, and that there are people today who are arguing for that. So, but when you say it's materialism, I just want to make it clear. So Newton has this mechanistic idea of the universe, and you're saying that Adam Smith, 100 years plus later, is doing something similar with economics.
That is right.
Okay, and at what point?
And we still today, all our economics is based on this incentive mechanism, and it misunderstands the fundamental essence of wealth, which is knowledge, and economic growth, therefore, is learning. That's what economic growth is. That's why the learning curve is the most fundamental concept in business consulting, really. With every doubling of total units sold, prices drop between 20 and 30%. This is the learning curve. It's absolutely fundamental to the Boston Consulting Group and Bain and Company and McKinsey. Everybody uses the learning curve, but somehow they imagine that when you multiply learning curves across the whole economy, prices suddenly become a function of incentives and a kind of mechanistic process with governed by the money supply. And
Okay, so what was it in recent years that would have inspired you to write this book? In other words, this is something that these bad ideas have been carrying on since Adam Smith, but have they borne particular fruit suddenly or recently?
Pretty much. I mean, they have led to the idea that we have a limited planet, that human beings are somehow a plague on the planet. Human beings are depicted as chiefly mouths rather than minds. So you multiply human beings and you somehow burden the resource endowment. And,
but I just want to be clear that I'm tracking. So
it's all materialist superstition.
Okay, so
they don't understand that in the beginning was the Word.
Well,
not the atom.
I don't know why they're applauding, because I know they don't understand what you just said. I just want to be clear. I'm gonna, if we have time, I want to quibble with you on "in the beginning was the Word." Just to quibble. I don't really disagree, but we can quibble. But before we go there, you're talking about a Malthusian view of the world, a zero-sum game, Marxist view of the world, which we know is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally flawed because it's not God's idea. It's a very fallen idea. But you're saying that concept has taken control. I mean, it really
persisted, and it's now reached the point where people can't defend capitalism anymore. Because obviously, if incentives really govern the system, clearly Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Larry Page and Brin and Zuckerberg, all these richest Americans have passed beyond the mere being governed by incentives. So it opens up a fundamental contradiction in capitalism. So the left comes in and says, yeah, we can tax everything over $400 million. Surely nobody needs more than $400 million worth of incentives. But economics is not an incentive system. It's an information system. And and investments embody knowledge. And you can't, if you redistribute knowledge, it disappears. You can't redistribute resources in capitalism without essentially nullifying those resources.
So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your critique is of this heavy-handed, elites deciding that, okay, now we're going to redistribute. I mean, we can start there and say, who gives them the right to do that? I mean, I think we could start there. That's Marxist, statist philosophy. That's antithetical to our founding principles. So we would disagree with it there. But you're also saying that it doesn't work. What is your what is it that most recently made you say, I need to write about this? Is it that when you say we don't have people that can really explain capitalism or give a good defense of capitalism, is it because their definition of capitalism has become perverted in this way, that they're not talking about the capitalism that we would think of, but they're talking about capitalism as pure, as greed, as self-interest?
Well, it's that they don't understand the system. They believe that that somehow the key problem of the American economy is excessive money supply. That somehow we're suffering from inflation because the Federal Reserve is printing too much money. And
well, you wouldn't say that the Federal Reserve printing a lot of money is a good thing, or would you?
No, it's not a good thing. But it's money, because the Federal Reserve doesn't have a clue what money is. And nor do most conservatives who write about the money supply, beginning with Milton Friedman, who persuaded Richard Nixon to leave the gold standard. What if wealth is knowledge and growth, economic growth, is learning? What is money? Money is time. Money is tokenized time. Money is what remains scarce when everything else is abundant. Well, we have infinite horizons of potential knowledge. When
you say money, do you really mean wealth? Is that what you really mean?
No, I mean money. Money is an important function in the economy. It represents time, and time is both scarce. It's the one scarcity. You know, if as soon as you break away from the idea that resources are scarce, if you recognize that resources there are essentially as abundant as atoms in the universe, as ideas in the mind of God, you recognize that essentially economics is a study of abundance, not of scarcity. And what's scarce? The scarcity we all face is time. And the way time is translated into economics is through money, which is tokenized time. And that's the scarcity. And I wrote the introduction to a book called Superabundance that was written by Gail Pooley and Marion Tupy. And it demonstrates that the learning curve continues to prevail, that we are not suffering from inflation. We're suffering from ghastly misallocation of resources. We're suffering from the terrible affliction of the religion of climate change, where we worship windmill totem poles and druidical sun henges.
Did you say druidical sun henges?
Yes.
You know, that's the secret word. You get $100. I never thought anybody would say that, but there he is. What you just said now, you're talking about several things at once, which I just want to clarify. You're talking about that it's this negative Malthusian zero-sum game worldview that says everything is limited and we're in big trouble, and so we've got to decrease the population. We've got to, it is fundamentally hopeless, if not nihilistic and satanic. Yeah. You're positing the opposite, which is tremendous optimism, obviously. It's tremendously optimistic. And so...
But it's true.
Well, no, right. I agree with you. But since I didn't write the book, let me ask you, why... where does that optimism come from? What is it? Is it your view of humanity that's different than your view? In other words, I would say if somebody believes that capitalism is greed, effectively, right? They, first of all, that's not true, right? Yeah. And if the free market relies on that, we know that the free market is just going to give us like better drugs and pornography. So the free market, apart from virtue, is a bad thing. Yeah. And so on the one hand, you have a bad definition of capitalism and the free market. You have people that don't really understand it and don't understand that virtue is a part of it. So is that at the heart of your thesis that we've forgotten about virtue, we've forgotten about the dignity of human beings and the possibilities of human beings? Where does your optimism stem from?
Well, that is, those propositions are true. We have come to regard human beings as mouths rather than minds, and we think they're the problem rather than the solution. But human beings that are mere products of some random evolutionary process cannot express this foundational truth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word has to shape and inform all our economic activity as well as our technological creativity.
So when you say in the beginning was the Word, you're not just being cheeky. In other words, you're not just saying in the beginning was the information and the Word, but you're saying it in the genuinely biblical sense,
yes,
that there's something.
The biblical sense is fundamental. That it's not. They didn't say in the beginning was the Word, but there were multiple other beginnings in which atoms prevailed and petroleum deposits were crucial. Or in the beginning was the Word, and this understanding that truth allows us to grasp the information theory of economics, which is what my book's about.
Is it possible to make this case without offending people who are atheists?
I think it probably is, but I mean, my book, there's not a lot of explicit biblical quotation or religious exposition in my book. Its foundational documents are Claude Shannon's information theory, where he identified information passing through a network as measured by its surprisal to what unexpected bits. In other words, if everything I tell you tonight you already know, zero information is being transmitted in Shannon's terms, and it's unexpected bits. So government planning, we got a $3 trillion Inflation Reduction Act that is chiefly devoted to subsidizing the most obsolete technologies in the world, which are windmills and solar panels, probably. They consume that resource that's most scarce, which, apart from time, is the planetary land area. It's just a purely religious commitment because it produces not net zero energy, but it subtracts from energy or power by subverting the power grid, rendering it more vulnerable and less efficient. And in other words, this $3 trillion that we're lavishing on this climate change agenda reduces value everywhere it touches. It's emergency socialism, as I describe it, and why I call it life after capitalism is emergency socialism. You declare a climate crisis, you declare a pandemic, you declare whatever, the population crisis, and then you and then you impose socialism.
Right,
And
right.
that's the problem. It's not that some mistake that the Fed's making. It's the mistake that the politicians are all imposing on us. Emergency socialism.
Okay, so a part of what you're saying, obviously, is that all of this stuff is anti-freedom, anti-free market in the genuine sense of the free market. It's a fear of freedom. It's a fear of people governing themselves. It's a fear of the American founders' principles, really. And so, and I guess part of what you're saying is that people are using emergencies or fear to manipulate people so that they can control them. And so that's antithetical to what we believe about America and about self-governance and all these beautiful ideas. But it sounds like you're saying that a lot of capitalists have bought into this.
Yeah, a lot of them have.
Can you give us some names?
Well, Bill Gates, I don't know.
Okay. So yeah, but I mean, talk about that. So he's a capitalist. He's made many, many billions through the capitalistic system. But he feels like, okay, now maybe I've got enough, and I don't want to give others the opportunity to make the kind of money I did. Now that I have that money, I can impose a system on others. Yeah,
and they call them charities. I mean, the real self-indulgence of the rich is expressed in their charitable giving to a considerable degree. It's Bill Gates is devoted to the climate change emergency socialist agenda, and thus he's actually impeding economic growth and progress.
Right.
And one of the themes of this book is William Nordhaus's insight into time prices. I mean, Nordhaus, the Nobel laureate, Yale economist, he got his Nobel for climate change, of course. Nobels are ordinarily given for the worst ideas of the relevant winner.
Are you saying that Barack Obama's Nobel Prize was not entirely legitimate?
That's conceivable.
Right.
But Nordhaus was really provided the basis for this book, Superabundance by Pooley and Tupy, that shows that since 1980, world population has increased 75%, and the price in the number of hours of work a typical worker has to expend to earn the money to buy the 100 commodities that sustain his life has dropped 75%. Prices are not going up. Prices are going down. They go up only in those areas such as those touched by the Inflation Reduction Act. That's where you subsidize spurious advances and obsolete technologies, and
well, when there's outside meddling by elites who have power.
Yeah.
So you're really basically arguing for freedom and for the free market. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I am. Knowledge rather than power. My previous book was called Knowledge and Power, that was also expounding this theory.
Well, in the book, we had about 2 years ago, I had as my guest at Socrates in the City the great Dr. James Tour of Rice University, and I've written about him. You talk about him and his technologies in this book. In other words, he seems to me a signal example of why we should have hope that the party isn't over. In other words, because it seems to me that a lot of these elites, Bill Gates et al., they have decided that the party's over. We've grown as much as we can, and now we have to redistribute. We have to decrease the mouths to feed. It's fundamentally pessimistic.
Yeah.
And you're saying, no, there's no reason for the party to be over. If we do what we were doing, we can continue to grow. We can continue to build wealth.
Faster than ever. Actually, we're growing faster than ever around the world. Much of the growth isn't happening in the United States anymore because of our emergency socialism, but the world economy continues to grow at an amazing pace, fueled by unexpected developments, by surprisal. And Jim Tour, who is runs a laboratory at Rice University, has developed a way to produce graphene, which is the new material. Think of the Iron Age, the Steel Age, the Silicon epoch, and now we're about to move into the Graphene Age, which is a single layer of carbon atoms.
Do you have any in your pocket?
Which is 200 times stronger than steel. It's 1,000 times more conductive than copper. It's as flexible as rubber. It's transparent. It switches in the terahertz, trillions of times a second, rather than in the gigahertz, billions of times a second as silicon switches. And it is the new paradigm for a new economy and really a new epoch of creativity. And it was completely unexpected. It required a new physics to explain it. The new physics is called topology. There have been 5 Nobel Prizes awarded for it so far. And because it's the behavior of graphene was totally unexpected. It's a single layer of graphite you encounter every day when you use a lead pencil. You are depositing millions of layers of graphene on the paper, on your paper, and this material you mix it with concrete, for example, and the concrete in parts per million, and the concrete becomes 35% stronger.
You've obviously invested in this.
I have invested in Jim Tour's major innovation, which is called flash joule heating. And it may not be, I'm not claiming that my investment will necessarily prosper because for the last 20 years since graphene was discovered, there have been 40 papers, peer-reviewed papers published every day. So this is just a frenzy of entrepreneurial activity has been unleashed all around the world. And Jim Tour has propagated some 25 companies from his lab at Rice in Houston. But it's possible that his particular formula won't prevail, but it's called flash joule heating, and it can convert any form of garbage, any carbon-based refuse, into perfect layers of turbostratic graphene that is usable industrially. And a company that produces it is called Universal Matter. And but there are thousands of companies around the world, and in my newsletters I've struggled with trying to sort out this incredible efflorescence of creativity all around the world.
Why, other than in your newsletter, why is it that everyone wouldn't be generally aware of this? This is clearly monumental news.
It just started. What happened was the discovery of this material occurred in 2004. The original discovery was accomplished at Manchester University in England by Andrei Geim and Kostanestelikov. I've got it wrong. No, Zelikov. Anyway, so they did it with Scotch tape. In other words, they've separated single layers of graphene from a block of graphite by using Scotch tape. And this method does not translate readily to industrial bonanzas, but it did win them both $1 million Nobel Prizes. And they specified all these properties of a single layer of graphene, which completely inconsistent with the previous physics, which had held that any single layer of graphene would just break into shards. It could not be employed as a material usable in concrete or asphalt, and as one of Jim Torr's companies. Almost all Jim Torr's companies are in Israel, by the way. And this is another example. I mean, the idea that 0.02% of the world's population should produce most of the key inventions of our era is completely contrary to what an incentive theory of economics would predict. I mean, my book, The Israel Test, which has been republished now, I'm yakking about it everywhere, but literally the whole AI revolution, which imparts to American companies 70% of global market cap at the moment. American companies hold 70% of the market cap of global corporations. And this is heavily attributable to AI. And the key development in artificial intelligence was NVIDIA Corporation, which made game graphics processors for games. It bought an Israeli company called Mellanox, which made it possible to transform these graphics processors that could handle 3D graphics for games into hyperscale computers which could process at once trillions of parameters of data in order to generate the products of artificial intelligence. But this AI, as Jensen Huang, head of NVIDIA, acknowledged that when he bought Mellanox, this Israeli communications company, Mellanox had a bigger footprint in all the data centers of the world than NVIDIA did. And since then, NVIDIA has become the most valuable company in the world, $3 trillion on good days. So, I mean, there's just a tremendous upsurge of creativity across the world economy, much of it traceable back to Israel, of all. And I showed this in the Israel test. It's not just NVIDIA, it's Intel, it's Google, it's IBM, it's...
This all sounds very positive, but obviously you're concerned that that there are forces working against these things happening. In other words, what would we need specific changes in governance to facilitate these
we
things.
we can't have people declaring pandemics every couple of years and closing down the world economy or
So they're
declaring a climate crisis every time there's a rainstorm and an untoward weather event. I mean, I talk a lot about this because it's the stupidest thing we're currently doing. I mean, to spend $3 trillion, it's distorted every decision by every company almost across our whole economy, and essentially debauched our capitalist system. And and yet when conservatives attack, make a case, you find them, they can mention climate hysteria, but they talk about inflation, not recognizing that prices continue to plummet measured by time rather than by these GDP numbers, which are almost entirely spurious now. GDP values every government dollar spent is worth its cost, while vastly underestimating the value of graphene or AI or all these.
So who's with you in this? Because you really do feel like we're on the verge of great things. I'm trying to think what to compare it to. This is not like the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill. This is
it's really bigger.
It's the discovery of fossil fuels and having internal combustion engines. It's a whole new future that awaits us.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, where do you see it going, and what do you think is the principal difficulty now? Is it that we have pessimists and Marxists running things?
Pessimists, atheists, people who think in the beginning was the atom and we got a limited number of atoms and we better clutch them to ourselves So at
the heart of it, I mean, we started there, but at the heart of it, this is a critique of materialism. This is this idea that
materialist superstition,
that there is no God. There's just some stuff, and we don't get any more stuff, and we can't make more stuff.
Right.
And we would say that's correct. You don't need to make any more stuff, but what you can make, God has given us the ability to create wealth, to create new things, but that requires the concept of mind. It requires something that is unique to human beings. Let's say that. At what point? Because I know you didn't always think this way. At what point did your views change? Were you always someone who believed in God, or did that at some point begin to inform your thinking about economics?
I mean, my mother was a fervent Christian, and loved your book. Bonhoeffer was one of her favorite books at the end of her life. It actually animated her last 3 years, I believe. It was just amazing, the impact because my father was killed in the Second World War. He went to Germany and with David Rockefeller, his college roommate, and heard Hitler rant and decided that
maybe Hitler wasn't all good?
Yeah, that Hitler would have to be stopped. And he thought that technology would be the way to stop him, that air power was the way to stop him.
What year did your father hear Hitler?
What
year?
1936.
Okay, in 1936, your father and his Harvard roommate, Rockefeller. Which Rockefeller?
David.
David. Go to Germany, hear Hitler, and know that he needs to be stopped.
That's right. And he went, he was one of the first people at the council. He and David were the youngest members of the Council on Foreign Relations, and my father famously challenged Allen Dulles, who was there and who was advocating negotiations with the Germans, or, it was, he was really a passionate opponent of Nazism before it was politically correct to be opposed. And he also was a passionate opponent of FDR, which is sort of contrary in history. My father was editor of the Crimson in 1936, and ended
at Harvard, yeah.
Yeah, at Harvard, and ended a front page editorial on FDR's visit to Harvard for its tercentenary celebration with the statement, "Let the presence of this man in the White House at this time of our tercentenary celebration serve as a useful antidote to the natural overemphasis on Harvard's successes." And my father studied Austrian economics back then. I mean, he was
Hayek,
and really could have written Wealth and Poverty. I didn't I didn't know this when I wrote Wealth and Poverty, but I really was guided by my father in writing it. He was writing a book that could have been entitled Wealth and Poverty.
Wow.
When he died. And I never saw this manuscript until 10 years after I wrote Wealth and Poverty. So I believe that that the world is much more miraculous and spiritual and fraught with faith than science tells us. And a crucial thing is to understand that people are not the same, that you can't move, they want to move the semiconductor industry entirely to the United States, despite the fact that the people who make it work are mostly in Taiwan and Israel. And that's why the CHIP Act is so far had virtually no positive impact on our chip business. It's spent money enshrining obsolescent technologies. It diverts attention from new opportunities like graphene to old kludge systems that precede graphene. There's a great development in graphene electronics that is 1,000 times more efficient than silicon electronics. And this is a really practical agenda that we're driving passionately to China at the moment, because all our effort to stop Chinese immigrants from stealing our technology, what it accomplishes is to force these Chinese students who want to stay here to go back to China, where they're lavished with venture capital to pursue the new graphene electronics. And that's really happened. And it's a major mistake, and it's partly this view that human beings are manipulable, that the world isn't driven by genius producing unexpected truths, that somehow we can see the truth and manipulate human beings to achieve economic growth. But since information is surprise, you can't really plan it. And this is, Shannon shows this. Information is unexpected bits. And we're trying to run the economy
Right.
on bits that are already verified and certified and are probably erroneous. And
I saw, we're pretty much out of time, but I saw part of the conversation that President Trump had with Elon Musk, I don't know, some weeks ago. And I found myself being just staggered by the two of them spitballing ideas, technology. And I thought, what's the last time I've heard anything like this? The idea that our future could be better than the present or the past. That level of raw hopefulness, which is fundamentally American, is something that has just gone out of the public conversation. And it seems to me that's what you're arguing for. That's what you hope will be allowed to happen. I'm just so grateful for you, George. I am sorry we're out of time, but we need a little hope. So thank you for giving us a little hope. I desperately want to continue this conversation with you because there's so much. So let me simply say, to be continued, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.